yeah, we're going to talk about blah blah blah. Hello everyone, this is Jan and Ollie, and we are here on our last day of this trip, and we are in Belize. Ollie posted a video on his Facebook page yesterday, in which we asked for if you guys had any questions about this video series. And today we are gonna answer a few of your questions.
Yeah, so before we started recording this, I was actually saying to Jan that I was feeling a little bit negative about the whole series. And I think it's important we talk about this because I've got to be honest, I do feel like we have let you down with this whole series. I mean, there's a number of issues, and I think what the best thing for us to do is kind of talk through these. And I think the one question is what we set out to do and whether that was a good idea. And then another question is whether or not we could have made more of the trip and the videos we actually made for you guys. And there's one comment here from Stu who says, very disappointed as this was supposed to be about immersion. Very little Spanish spoken, mostly English. I didn't want to see a personal holiday video. There were lost opportunities, ordering food and drink, blah blah blah, and the Spanish was in the background. So Stu didn't like the series, and there was a few other videos, comments that were basically along the same lines. So I think the mistake that we've made is to set out to do a Spanish immersion trip. Because not that we didn't want that, but the reality is that where we have chosen to come is probably the worst place in the world for Spanish immersion.
Ollie thinks so. I think that the main problem is that we were traveling together. I think if you travel alone, you have to speak Spanish all the time. It's much easier to meet other people. I think that's the main thing. I think even if we would have gone to, I don't know, like a place somewhere in Mexico where no tourists come, and we were together, then obviously we spent most of our day together, right? So we would still be speaking English. I think that's the main problem. Well, it's not a problem for me because of course I enjoyed this trip and we got opportunities to speak Spanish, but it was not.
It wasn't
immersion.
Spanish immersion, yeah, and this is the thing. There's a lot of different issues here. I feel like I've spoken a lot of Spanish on this trip, honestly. I mean, I've been speaking to everybody. We haven't been able to get that on camera, and I take responsibility for that.
I think that we actually only have spoken Spanish with the people on this trip so far. The people we've met. We haven't spoken any English, only with each other. And yeah, maybe you didn't see that in the video. Although I think in the last few videos we basically recorded every conversation we had.
Yeah, we have tried in the last few videos to show more Spanish, and including every single interaction. I totally accept in the first half of the series because I think we thought that it's not interesting for you to see us getting in a taxi or ordering food, but we understand that if you don't see that, then there's no other Spanish being spoken. Mm-hmm. But I think one clear takeaway, I mean, from the perspective of getting immersion, is that if you traveling by yourself is far better. Yeah. I think it may be more or less fun depending on you and the way you like to travel. Mm-hmm. We wanted to do something together, and I think as a result, I'm kind of happy with the Spanish that I've spoken, even though we didn't really show you enough of it. Mm-hmm. But I think for Jan, I mean, you would have spoken 4 or 5 times as much if you had been by yourself.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think now we come to maybe the conclusion of the story. The lesson of this video series is that even if you are in the country, and this is of course a problem many people have, even if you live in the country or travel through the country, you're not automatically going to speak the language, because naturally you're going to spend most of your time with your friends and the people you feel comfortable with.
Right. And so the question is, and then this comes to a question right down here:
how do you get immersion?
Yeah, so Marco asks, when you're traveling, you can be looking for local language meetups or more structured situations. Is that a good way to get more immersion and exposure to the target language? He also says, I really appreciate that you guys are documenting your experience in such a true and honest way without holding back all the struggles this experience provides. Well, thanks for I'm glad you appreciate that, Marco. We have tried to do that, show you some of the struggles at least. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, what we have lacked is more structured situations, and I think my feeling is that if we weren't in such a touristy place, that we could have actually found those situations quite easily. And I'm comparing this to my experiences in other places. So I remember when I went to Argentina, I would do things like go to cultural centers.
But were you alone?
I was alone.
Yeah, he was alone. I think that's the whole thing, that we were not alone.
Yeah. But there is certainly what we found is that here, when the places that we've travelled, one of the things that makes it different from other places we've been before is that, for a start, there is a big gap everywhere you go between the locals who are in the tourist industry and the tourists themselves who are travelling, and that does create a gulf between people.
Yeah.
Well, we have chatted to people all over the place, but it's not, it's not the kind of situation that I've had travelling in somewhere like Brazil, for example, where often you kind of meet people in local towns, and then they'd invite you out to a party or whatever, and you can make friends quite easily. It's not been like that here. I think that's one issue. The other issue is that if you're in a big city, then there are other things you can do. So you can go to, like Marcus says, language events, language meetups.
Yeah.
You can actually go to other events where people who are maybe more like you can congregate and gather, and that can be a meeting like-minded people. I think is always the goal.
Yeah, but again, I think when you're traveling around in a country, when you live somewhere, of course you can do all these things. But when you're traveling around, where you also want to explore a country, I think it's going to be tricky. And of course, because we're only staying at a place for 1 or 2 nights, so do we also want to go to language meetups? Yeah, could be, but you can also do these things in your own city, especially if you live in a big city. So, yeah, what's the best way to get language immersion? Well, let me just share a few of my past experiences. I went to China it was a few years ago, where I was learning Mandarin Chinese, and as soon as I could hold very basic conversations, I actually started dating girls. Now, of course, dating girls is not the only way to get immersion, but that really helped. And again, I was alone. They did not speak English, so I only had to speak Chinese, and I was in the country for 5 months, and at that time I really felt immersed. Later on, I also got Chinese male friends in the language, and that really helps. So I think that getting a boyfriend or a girlfriend or just friends in general, of course, helps. But traveling around the country and not being single, that's not very useful.
That's also not very practical for a lot of people. I mean, because a lot of people who travel, then they're not single. They are probably they like to travel with friends, and so the same question is there, I think. There's an interesting question from Helen here, which is that, and it's along these lines: how do you create situations in which you can speak Spanish, and is this more beneficial when you're at the lower stages? This is a good question. It seems like there are more opportunities for Jan to practice asking questions or buying drinks than there are for Ollie, who does not need to practice the basics but wants to take part in more in-depth conversations. Mm-hmm. Maybe the lesson is it better to travel alone so you have more opportunities to interact with the locals? And she says, the videos are making me think, okay, my Spanish is quite basic, but that's okay because there's no need for anything else.
Mm-hmm. I think it makes sense.
I think that's a very good observation, Helen. I mean, I said to Jan when we first arrived here that it was very much the case that, because I've spoken Spanish for a long time, as soon as we kind of stepped off the plane, I'm kind of immediately comfortable talking with people. And I guess the truth is that I'm not necessarily looking for immersion so much. I mean, that's the honest truth.
I've already had that.
Because I've had that a lot, and for me, it's interesting to come here and talk and meet with the locals. And I don't really feel that my Spanish has changed or improved at all having been here. It's just been kind of useful practice. Mm-hmm. So this comes back again to, I think, an error that we made when we decided what this series was going to be about. But how about you, Jan? I mean, do you think it's been more useful for you being at a lower level and even traveling together with somebody else?
I think so, but the conversations are always very short in restaurants or with someone in the hotel. I think if you really want to practice Spanish, I think if I want to improve my Spanish, I could have done 2 things. One is intensively taking lessons online, but this is not immersion. Of course, we want to feel the language, we want to live the language. Another thing I think could have been very useful for me is like staying with a family at a homestay. This is something which is maybe worth experiencing in the future. Staying with the family, only speak the language, or just traveling alone. So most of the time, of course, Ollie Spanish is much better, and naturally, Ollie started the conversations. I think even if I had those maybe 5 extra conversations, it wouldn't have helped me that much in on this trip. So you need more time, even when you're in the country.
I mean, isn't the key to immersion that you just need to have friends? You need to be surrounded by, either you need to be surrounded by friends or family or whatever who speak to you in that language,
whatever it is.
Or you have to put yourself in a situation where you need to speak it every day, be that at work or like, I don't know, some kind of cultural exchange or scheme or study program or something like that. And this relates to a point by Paul Howlett. Says your videos show that you're having a good time traveling and seeing some good tourist sites, etc. But maybe it is just your videos, but I don't see that you really got a lot of Spanish speaking situations. That's apart from the lady who knew Ollie, blah blah blah. Most of your videos are in English, which of course is okay, but when you are off camera, do you speak English between the two of you or Spanish? Yeah, I mean, we speak English, and we addressed this in an earlier video, but really the point behind this is that, like, we're not trying to, we don't have a like Spanish at all costs ethos. Like for us, like, it's really about, like, language learning is about integrating it into your life, and like, we are friends, right? And so when we're traveling, we want to have a good time together as well. People keep saying to us, like, why don't you just speak Spanish between the two of you all the time? I mean, that would be so boring and frustrating.
Yeah, especially for Ollie.
Especially for me. But our friendship is in English, and so we speak English. Like, that's the reality of the situation. And so we do speak. We have actually spoken. We practice a lot of other languages, like, just for fun. But yeah, we basically speak in English, and I think we have got a lot more Spanish practice off camera than we've been able to show you, I think. But I have to say, it is again very transactional. It's like ordering from a menu, or it's, you know, ordering boat tickets or whatever. Yeah.
Ollie is not my Spanish teacher, and I'm happy. I'm fine with that. I think I cannot really expect from Ollie to speak Spanish to me all the time. It's gonna take too much of his patience.
But I think, but you've had a good time though, right? You've this has been beneficial for your, regardless of how well we've managed to show it on camera.
Yeah.
Which I think we have failed at. I think that, but you've said to me that it's been beneficial. You feel more positive about Spanish having.
Yeah, that for sure, because I see it works, right? The thing with my Spanish before was basically that I've basically never used the language in real situations, and as I said to you the other day, like, speaking Spanish, and it feels very natural. I'm not really thinking about it anymore. So I was really happy to see that it still works, and that people understand me, that I can understand the people, and I guess it definitely became a little bit more confident in Spanish, but no total immersion. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So, quick question. Jefferson asks, what level of your target language do you guys think is appropriate to try this kind of trip and get the most out of the experience? Yeah. What's for sure is you should not do this trip as a beginner. No. There's no point, because you can't talk with people yet. Yeah. I think your level is pretty good for this kind of trip.
I think A2, B1 is probably very good, so that you can already start conversations. You can understand a little bit, but it's still not very good. You cannot have in-depth conversations yet, but I think that's fine, because most conversations that you are having are very short and simple. So yeah, A2, B1, I think.
Cherie says, Ollie seems so full of himself. No more of him.
Ollie, no more of you. Stop.
What can I say? I apologise for that. Not much I can do about it. I mean, I think one thing to say is we are both probably slightly different on camera than we are in real life, I think. But, you know, what am I going to say? If that's... I'll take the feedback.
Chanel asks, what has been the most difficult challenge that you have had since arriving in Mexico? I think that's meeting locals and really having in-depth conversations, because we're moving all the time. Like, establishing friendships is not really possible when you move every 1 or 2 days.
Language challenge though. Like, what's the most difficult thing about Spanish?
About Spanish.
I mean, it might be different for you, but for me, no particular problems. It's just the odd word. Like there are local Mexican words here that you might not know, that I don't know, and it's just a question of hearing them once, and usually because the unknown words are in context, it's easier to understand. I mean, like the first time I heard cenote, which is the word for these big natural pools that we showed you, I didn't know what that was, but then I ask, what's a cenote? And they tell me, and I know it. And we met some young Mexicans who told us some slang like jalo and things like that, which jalo meaning cool or good. And but again, it's mostly just single words. I wouldn't say I had any particular problems. Yeah, I mean, how about you?
Sorry, I was reading the next question.
Okay. I mean, I think your problems are not related to Mexican Spanish.
No,
they're related to Spanish in general, right?
Yeah. For me, I don't know. I think it's just a lack of practice. I often know the words, I can understand it well, but I haven't used enough Spanish. Sometimes even, that the other day I wanted to say you had, like a very simple verb conjugation in the past tense, and even I didn't know that. I didn't know how to say that. So these are things I find out on this trip. That sometimes I don't know very basic stuff.
So Sewell asks, I enjoy your videos very much. Thanks for making interesting videos. My question is, how much does it cost about the entire immersion trip? How much does it cost? We answered this on the podcast. We recorded a similar episode for the I Will Teach You a Language podcast a couple of days ago. I think what number
probably 50 or 60 euros per day, I think. Like for accommodation, food and transportation, excluding the flights, of course.
Yeah, and that breaks down at about hotel rooms are about 25 euros each, 25 euros each.
Yeah,
maybe?
20, 30. I think you were paying a little bit more, so between 20 and 30 euros for a meal in Mexico.
10 euros for lunch and dinner.
Yeah.
And that's here as well, which is a really touristy area. But yeah, about 50 euros a day, you're absolutely fine. And you can save a lot of money. You can probably survive on half of that if you stay in hostels and eat cheaper food. So Stay, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, says, have you ever landed abroad excited to use a language with locals for the first time and left disappointed at how it went? If yes, how did you bounce back? Jan?
Of course, speaking a language for real in a country is different than when you have language lessons online. And I went to Russia recently, and also Azerbaijan. Sorry, it was not in Russia. It was in Azerbaijan, where they also speak Russian. And obviously, it was very difficult to hold conversations. Much more difficult than with a teacher on italki, because people often don't adjust. So, can feel a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, it's also cool to see that people actually can understand the word that you know. So, it can be more difficult than you think, but I think at the same time it's really cool to see that it works in real life.
Yeah, I've had this experience a lot. I think to a certain extent it maybe depends on your personality. Like, I'm not one of those people who will just land in another country and then just shamelessly talk with anybody. I'm actually quite self-conscious when I speak a language that I'm not so comfortable with. Recently I had this experience in Hong Kong. I was really excited to speak a lot of Cantonese, but a lot of the people I met just replied in English, and they speak really good English. Not everybody, but the circles that I moved in would speak very good English, and I got a bit discouraged about that. The way I bounce back is going back to the things that I know well and the things that I know that work, which is finding teachers or tutors that I can speak with regularly and who can help encourage me and get good quality language practice, and then making friends in the target language. Back in London, I came back to London and I met a few Cantonese speaking friends quickly. I went out and specifically tried to do that, and then now actually I get much more Cantonese practice in London than I did in Hong Kong. So it's about, you have to create the situation that you need, which ironically is what we haven't been able to do here in Mexico. This goes to show it's not easy, guys.
It's not easy.
We've actually, like, during this trip, we've spent a lot of time discussing how we can create better videos, get more out of it, and we have really tried. It might not look like it, but we've really tried to show you as much Spanish as we can, and it's, we haven't really managed it very well.
Maybe we should travel solo next time. The only problem then is who's going to record everything.
Right, yeah, traveling solo is harder to make good videos. But yeah, is there anything else?
Yeah. One more question. from Daisy and Gwen, your videos look great. Just wonder how much time does it take you to make one video for one day? Well, that's a good question. It indeed takes a lot of time to make a video. How much time? I would say like 1 or 2 hours. No, I would say at least 2 hours for the editing. And then, of course, we need to add the subtitles, which takes half an hour maybe.
Yeah, it depends how many subtitles are added. I mean, basically our process is we begin the day discussing what the theme of the day is going to be. Because one of the things that we found is if we just record every situation we're speaking Spanish, actually that doesn't make for a very entertaining video. Mm-hmm. I mean, you might argue that they weren't entertaining videos anyway, but
you must have a story.
But we try
right?
to tell a story of some kind, right? And so we usually have breakfast and we think, okay, what's the story for today? What are we going to tell? And then throughout the day, we try to record situations that come up that we think are interesting. That doesn't really take time because we're doing it anyway. And then in the evening, it takes us about 2 hours to put all the clips together, edit the video, add the music, and make it cut down. So it's a good amount of time. And then if we have to add subtitles, that's another 30-40 minutes at least on top of that.
And we have to make a thumbnail.
And then we have to make thumbnails for the videos, upload them. It's probably a good 3 hours a day. Yeah. So it's a significant time investment when you are in somewhere like this, right? And you kind of you want to try and also enjoy the time. So yeah, we've spent quite a lot of time editing video. We take it in turns. So I do it one day, Jan does it the next day.
Most of the time we film both, right, on one day, right? Film with both our cameras.
Yeah, so we use both cameras to film stuff, and then we import it all in there together. Yeah. So there we go. I mean, that's it. Any last words? Huh?
Any last words? Yeah, immersion. So, if you want immersion, don't travel with a friend.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we're in a position to give advice on this after what's happened to us, but nevertheless, if we had to do this again and get more immersion, then we would travel alone. We would not go to a touristy place like this. Yeah. One of the things about traveling alone, I guess, is you would maybe stay in hostels, which might help you to meet other people, although they
or international people.
They might be English speaking. But yeah, I think probably staying in one place for a longer period of time is probably better, because then you can get to know people and
you can create friendships in that relationship, right? That's basically what has been the biggest challenge for us on this trip. A homestay, I think, would also be interesting. Would also be worth trying.
And I guess the last thing I'd say is that having come halfway across the world to try and get Spanish immersion, I'm really even more convinced now that you don't need to travel in order to get it.
Yeah.
Like where I live in London, I have a lot of language immersion, as much as I want really, and I'm almost as excited to go back knowing that I'm going to be able to speak a lot of Cantonese when I go back, and some Japanese and some Portuguese maybe. Mm-hmm. So like don't go on a two-week trip to a country just to order your Spanish. Just to practice your Spanish. Of course, it's nice to see that it works, and that people understand you, and it might motivate you to learn more. But I don't think it's the most effective way to make the language part of yourself. If you want to do that, then you really need to spend more time with locals. Maybe stay in one place, create friendships in that language. So. I think that was it. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the series for what it is. I mean, we're doing this. We're learning as well, right? I mean, we're doing this annually now. Last year we went to Thailand and we did a 2-week intensive Thai experiment. Next year we're going to. I guess we can announce it, can we? Why not? I guess going into next year's trip, one of the things we're going to have to think about is how can we improve on what we've done here, right? When we take the lessons that we've learned here in Cancun and apply that to, and I guess we might stay in one place, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think that's going to be better for immersion.
So yeah, that's what we got. Hope you enjoyed it, guys. And as ever, best of luck with your languages and with your Spanish. Feel free to leave comments on this video, and we'll be here. We read all the comments. We answer all the comments and questions. And again, thanks for the support. Yeah. And best of luck.
Thanks for the support, and greetings from very sunny and hot Belize.
Adios.
Adios.